The appropriate attitude to the past and the future is this three-factor transformation, which is harmonious integration. So this is Sutra 16 again, Sutra 16 of Book 3. And I covered this in the previous video, but there's more to say about it. It's the first application of samyama, the first practical application of samyama, which I've translated here as harmonious integration. The traditional understanding is that Book 3 is about acquiring supernormal powers, and supernormal powers are acquired by the application of samyama. So this sutra might be understood in a traditional sense as a special kind of knowledge with respect to the past and the future. Perhaps it might be knowledge of past lives. That's what is meant by the past. And the future could be knowledge of future events, some kind of divination. Or it could be knowledge of future lives. Now, on occasion during this commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I've made reference to the Buddha's enlightenment. Now, some might not think this is appropriate because Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is regarded as a Hindu text, but I don't really see any need to follow such demarcation. The story of the Buddha gives us the classic story of enlightenment. And I'm going to relate a particular incident from the Buddha's enlightenment story, which relates very much to this sutra. This incident is described in Bhikkhu Nanamoli's The Life of the Buddha. Bhikkhu Nanamoli didn't actually write it. What he did is he compiled his text from canonical sources. These sources are known as the Pali Canon. Pali is a dialect of Sanskrit. And these are regarded as the earliest texts of Buddhism. And they are full of miracles. But I'll say more about that in a minute. Let me just read this particular text, known as the Majjhima Nikaya, or middle-length sayings of the Buddha. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, and rid of imperfection, when it had become malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I inclined my mind to the knowledge of recollection of past life. So this sounds very much like the state of samyama, doesn't it? The Buddha, being in a state of harmonious integration, inclined his mind to the knowledge of recollection of past life. I recollected my manifold past life, that is to say, 1 birth, 2, 3, 4, 5 births, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many ages of world contraction, many ages of world expansion, many ages of world contraction and expansion. I was there so named of such a race, with such an appearance, such food, such experience of pleasure and pain, such a life term. And passing away thence, I reappeared elsewhere, and there too I was so named of such a race, with such an appearance, such experience of pleasure and pain, such a life term. Passing away thence, I reappeared here. Thus, with details and particulars, I recollected my manifold past life. This was the first true knowledge attained by me in the first watch of the night. So this is what the Buddha did after he reached enlightenment. He remembered his past lives. So the Buddha then goes on to say how he sees beings being reborn in their future conditions according to their past karma and so on. So it seems that if you're enlightened, you should be able to direct your mind to remembering all your past lives. Not only lives in this universe, but lives in previous universes before the creation of this universe and the dissolution of the previous one. So this is fascinating, isn't it? You'd think the Buddha would be able to tell us about times perhaps that he lived in ancient Egypt. Perhaps he was one of the slaves building the pyramids. Or perhaps he was some ancient druid in the Celtic Isles. Or perhaps he was a Siberian shaman. Or an Australian Aborigine, and he could tell us all about what life was like at these times. And he could tell us what life was like in a previous universe, in a different universe. Perhaps he'd even been born on other planets, and he could tell us about extraterrestrial lives. And the Buddha spoke about his past lives now and again. Occasionally he would tell us he was such and such a person, undergoing such and such experience, and so on. And the curious thing is, whenever the Buddha spoke about his past lives, the whole context was identical to life in ancient India. It was identical to the circumstances of his own immediate lifetime. There was the same social system, the same kind of politics. There was nothing to distinguish the conditions of the Buddha's past lives with those of his present existence. So we have to be very, very careful what's meant here by past lives. And I've looked into this in some detail in some videos I did on the Yoga Vasishtha. I'll put some links in the information box below the video. So what are we to make of this? If you read these early Buddhist texts, you'll see that the Buddha was performing miracles all the time on a very casual basis. He even used miracles to convert people. His father was a case in point. He didn't convert his father by some soul-penetrating wisdom. He did some miracles, and this convinced his father to join the order that the Buddha subsequently set up. So the Buddha had no qualms about demonstrating his powers or using them. Now, I've pointed out that the purpose, one of the main purposes of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, along with other wisdom texts, is to make the transition from identification with consensus reality to identification with the nature of pure awareness, with samadhi. And this might not seem very exciting to some people. It's an incredibly wonderful thing. And it's very difficult to convey this wonder. It is just as wonderful, actually it's more wonderful than the possibility of supernormal powers. What the wisdom texts are pointing us to is the ultimate resolution of all of existence. It's very wonderful, but if that doesn't excite you, if that doesn't mean anything to you, then in order to convey the wonder, it's perfectly natural to express that wonder in terms of supernormal powers. It's like building giant Buddhas and wonderful edifices, temples and so on, as a way of trying to express the wonder of what is on offer here. So it's part of a natural exuberance to talk in terms of supernormal powers. Somebody told me a while back about this Tibetan Lama who is head of a particular Tibetan Buddhist sect here in Great Britain. And he told me with all seriousness that this person, this Lama, has to put rocks in his robes. This is to stop him lifting off the ground when he's meditating. It's obviously a lot of rubbish. I don't even have to see this for myself. And I don't think anybody was trying to pull the wool over my eyes or to create a false story. It's just expressing well, let's hope it's expressing what might be the spiritual authority of this particular Lama, or expressing this person's enthusiasm for this Lama. When you're enthusiastic for a spiritual teacher, you want to be able to communicate your enthusiasm by, well, you might talk about what a wonderful human being they are, but the icing on the cake is to be able to say that they've got some sort of supernormal power. So this is it. It's the expression of a natural exuberance to take that further step, to express the wonder of the teaching in terms of supernormal powers. Now, as I say, we're moving from the consensus reality to a spiritual reality, the reality of awareness. And we shouldn't try to hang on to consensus reality. And the possibility of supernormal powers is about hanging on to consensus reality. And now in my commentary on the Sutras, I talk from my own experience. I'm not communicating philosophical ideas or beliefs or anything like that. For me, the pertinence of the Sutras is that they are directly relevant to my existential situation. I sometimes wonder about those commentators on the Sutras who are quite happily take the traditional explanation that this is about supernormal powers. Are they talking from their own experience? Have they practiced yoga and this is what they found? They've developed supernormal powers? Or are they just repeating the conventional understanding that's been passed down for centuries? The whole point for me is that this has to come from personal experience. And I have to talk about this from my own experience. For me, this sutra is talking about the past and the future. This is the first application of samyama. And I have a perfect example that I can apply this sutra to right now. Currently I'm looking for some employment, some paid employment. And it's proven to be quite tricky. It's causing me anxiety about the future, the state of my future finances. So there's the future. It's uncertain, unsure. And I've got the past to deal with in terms of the sort of work I've done before. I'm not able to get work in that direction anymore. I'm not even able to get interviews. Somebody said recently I need to reinvent myself. I have to think in other ways. So I'm hedged here. I'm stuck in between my past experience and my feelings about what I can do and my future uncertainty. This is a very common experience. I think many people are in this situation who've lost their jobs and don't know where to go to next, and they might have a few years behind them. They're not young anymore, which makes it kind of difficult on the job market. It can have quite a terrible effect on people. Depression, breakdowns and so on. But for me, this is what Sutra 16 is about. There's a certain momentum from the past, pushing me in a certain direction, which is a bit of a dead end, and there's anxiety and panic about the future. So I have to come back to a balanced condition. A balanced condition once again. I have to take an appropriate attitude to the past and the future. This is the phrase I use to translate jnana, sometimes translated as knowledge, but it's not knowledge. It's nothing to do with concepts or ideas and so on. It's about an appropriate attitude which maintains a balanced disposition. We'll see how I get on.